Our society is, I'm not going to say it's collapsing because of mental health issues, but I'm very close to saying that. We need to make sure that we're giving everyone a nice time on earth and that we help and that we make sure that we have the tools to help people when they need it most. We're at a stage where we've built the product and we build it together with 20 clinicians. Now we know parts of it fit. So Aisel's main task right now is to make sure that the things that fit work seamlessly, they're easy to use, and that more psychiatrists can come out and benefit from it. So heading into 2026, our focus is going to be on stability and then scaling up our solution.
Nice. So where does the name come from? What's Aisel Health?
So Aisel Health originally comes actually from, and now I'm unfortunately going to say it in Danish, but Aisel in Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, he's called Eeyore in English, but Aisel, he suffers from depression. And Aisel is in the psychiatric space. And originally we thought, depression is going to be our main focus. So we named the company after Aisel, Eeyore.
So you said that depression was, you thought that depression would be the primary focus. It's not?
I mean, depression is one of our many focus, but what Aisel is focusing on is ensuring that we collect the right patient information ahead of time so that psychiatrists, they start their sessions informed and that they use the time to care for the patient, make clinical decisions with and for the patient, not collecting basic information. So we actually start early in the process about where we collect information. That, of course, affects a lot of people with depression. Right now, we're at a stage where it's applicable to anyone doing a psychiatric intake.
When you think about sort of all the great companies throughout time, they all sort of start rebelling against something. What is Aisel sort of rebelling against in psychiatry? What is it you want to fundamentally solve?
We want to fundamentally solve that psychiatrists' capacity today that's bound up on time. We're not getting more psychiatrists, but on the flip side, we're getting more patients. Psychiatrists, they are such a scarce and specialized resource. They can afford to do only one thing, and that's make clinical decisions. Everything else needs to go.
So when you think about somatics and psychiatry as sort of two distinct different parts of healthcare.
Well, in Denmark, not anymore. We're bringing them together.
Which I think is probably awesome that that's happening in terms of the focus. But could you sort of help us understand the fundamental differences between those two disciplines in healthcare?
Absolutely. And I think on top of that, I would also love to maybe go down in the mental health space alone, because I think we also have a few misconceptions about what is the job of a psychiatrist. So first of all, starting in somatic health and mental health, somatic is obviously that's everything to do with the body. If you break your arm, if you need a blood test, if you have cancer, then we're over in the somatic area. We need to do a lot of tests. We need to, again, run your blood, do an MRI scan, and we can't do those things in psychiatry. In psychiatry, the only cues you have to a disease, at least today, is what comes out of the patient's mouth. So the most important data information that you can get to actually help a patient is what comes out of their mouth, what is self-reported from them, what is your assessment of how they're progressing in their recovery. So I think that's a fundamental difference. We don't have any scans. We are fully reliant on getting information from the patient and from the objective and subjective assessments that we made of any given patient. So in the whole mental health space, of course, we have psychiatrists. And I think to make this very clear from the beginning, psychiatrists are doctors. They go to med school and they specialize in psychiatry. They're the only ones that are allowed to give a diagnosis, that are allowed to prescribe medicine, that are allowed to prescribe a treatment plan. Then if you go down the funnel in mental health care, we of course have and that's where there's a common misconception, especially in layman, we have psychologists, we have coaches, psychotherapists. Their job is fundamentally different. Their job is they can alleviate and be part of a treatment plan, but they do that by delivering empathic care, by giving the patient the tools to help themselves. They cannot do diagnosis, medication, etc. And we have a lot of psychologists, we have a lot of psychotherapists, luckily, and they're doing an amazing job in delivering empathic care. But they fundamentally, they're not allowed to give a diagnosis and they're not allowed to make a clinical decision, which is why the focus of Aisel is, psychiatrists, they need to do clinical decisions because they're the only people who can do this. And we can't outsource that to anyone else in any part of the system. We can outsource all the other things that psychiatrists' time are now bound up with. Yes. So documentation, note-taking, follow-up with patients, getting the patient information, the subjective part where the patient tells, my story is this. I have a traumatic childhood. That part itself, that's just information the psychiatrist need to have. It doesn't mean the psychiatrist is the one that needs to ask it.
You mentioned earlier that you were looking at US numbers, but you thought that the situation was getting even worse in Denmark. What are those numbers like in EU or?
It's a similar stage, like both in Europe and in US. The general statistic is 1 in 5 will have any mental health disorder. That does not necessarily mean it's severe. It does not necessarily mean you have to go into psychiatric care, but 1 in 5 in Europe will have mental health disorder. And I think during COVID, when it was reported, it was like 1 in 2 will have some sort of anxiety or some sort of depression. Like it's incredibly normal. If you as a patient want to then, let's say you have like mild depression and you want to have psychiatric help, you want to maybe have some medication, then you can contact your GP and get a referral to a psychiatrist. The issue right now is if you don't do that, and assuming you don't go private, you have to wait 2 years. Like you will not be considered critical or urgent enough. And as you're waiting, your health is more likely to deteriorate. And then you become urgent and you become, of course, a higher cost for society, but it also becomes harder for you as a patient. It becomes harder for your family. And 2 years isn't good enough. Of course, you can like pay. There's not a lot of people that can afford that, especially if you're not like acute. So we just have an incredible mismatch on so many parameters, both on like the availability of psychiatrists, the price point, and of course, we have to set up the price, like supply demand. That's how it works. So the short answer is 1 in 2 has felt anxious or depressed. 1 in 5 will have any mental health disorder. And if we don't help the ones that have any mental health disorder, then they're just going to go in and get severe mental health disorders. And
if you were to sort of redesign it from scratch and say, this is not a system we can live with it in any way, shape or form, like what would that look like? Is it technology? Is it more people? What does that mix look like?
The way we can do it is through technology. Of course, the most optimal way to do it is just, let's get like an incredible amount of psychiatrists. Let's make them free. Let's make them available and like have everyone have their own personal psychiatrist and psychologist at any given time. I don't know who's going to fund that.
No.
And unfortunately, then we're back at the fact that your capacity would be bound up on time. So I think when we're imagining what a future could look like at Aisel and how technology could help enable this, we envision that a psychiatrist does the one thing, which is clinical decision making. Today, a psychiatrist, and I think at least my customers and our partners, they would agree with that. And that's also where I get my empirical data from. There's almost 80% of the day that doesn't go towards clinical decision making because you're in a consultation or you're in a review or you're doing documentation or you're following up with logistics and making that snapshot decision, having the information from the patient, from your peers, to make that clinical decision. That's the only thing psychiatrists should be doing. Everything else needs to go. We hope at Aisel that we can enable that's an opportunity. One way that we do it is that we collect information from patients ahead of time. So we base our interactive models on psychiatric protocols that the patient they get a link on their phone and then they can from home say, okay, this is the story that I have. This is why I'm here. Then the psychiatrist can get that information and make a decision about, okay, great. So you should perhaps not be in this clinic because I'm not specialized in what you do, or realistically, the plan is that we're going to go in and we're going to do medication and then we're going to go and do group therapy. I have a lot of other crazy ideas about what you could do, but I think, right here and now, enabling that clinical decision-making as the only part they do is what we envision as the best solution for it.
How do they respond to that? I assume that they agree when you talk to them that they would like to limit their daily interactions to that core piece, to that most specialized piece. Is that the case?
Psychiatrists, they know that they're in high demand. They know that their time is incredibly important. But I think as with any other profession, they do have reservations around, how is AI going to play into my role? So when we build our solution, we do it together with psychiatrists. We have people that's worked in psychiatric clinics on our team. We have psychiatrists on our advisory board. Every customer we have, we sit and we iterate with them and we ask them, what do you need? How can we make it easier for you to do clinical decision making? So I think if you position it like that and you don't come in and you say, now you need to only do this and everything else that you liked before, that's no longer your job. Like that's not going to fly. The individual psychiatrists also have a different opinion about what they consider their most important job to be. Some is all about the patient interaction. That's where they get their drive. Some is all about solving a complex case. And we are not here, of course, as a tech company to dictate how they split and do their time. We're just giving the option that, hey, there are parts that we can help out with if you let us. And we would love to help. And I think the response for patients have actually been quite incredible. When I, for example, because one of the reasons I'm also in this space is because I've been through psychiatric care. I know what it looks like. And typically you'll see, or at least in my case, I saw 4 or 5 or 6 mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc. And, with every single one of them, I sit there and I tell my story again. And I want to remember to give the full picture, but we only have 25 minutes on the clock. And then, I have to be out. So as a patient, you can also sit with that feeling like they don't know me, like I didn't have time or I forgot to say this. And then what works really well with the solution that we have out today, so on the tangible here and now, is that patients, they can give all of their information from home. And they can do it peacefully. If there's anything they want to come back to, fair enough, then they do that. And then they feel prepared, or patients feel more prepared going into the session. Psychiatrists know what's going to happen in the session. And then you start at an informed ground when you meet each other. And that we believe has a positive impact on both parties.
What you're talking about in terms of also the patient side of it, patients in mental health, that ability to also build trust about, when you go to an orthopedic, either we'll put, plaster on your arm and you'll be good in 6 months. And that's so tangible. But saying, you're going to have 12 months of environmental therapy and whatever it is, right? It also requires the patient to buy into that way of treatment.
It's what we often hear being referred to as the therapeutic alliance. Early in Aisel days, we also heard objections like, won't this break the trust with my patient? Like, what if I'm not the first one they speak to? How is that going to impact the trust? What we found is that by having your doctor know you better, you build a different kind of trust, and you build an informed ground of trust. What we also need to remember is it's all up to the individual. Like, no doctor that we work with or no patient that we ever will work with would be forced to do this. It's an offering, and it's something you can do. It's something that can help free up capacity. But at the end of the day, bringing in AI to healthcare settings, that's a new domain. None of us has been in this field for very long, because it is a very new field to see the widespread adoption of AI tools. So we also need to navigate where are the right things to do it. Then we need to reiterate, and we need to do it often. And in healthcare, it's not a market where you wanna test master, you want to be too risky. So we're doing it slowly. We're doing it together with psychiatrists, and we're getting their input on where can we help, rather than being too break fast and fail fast energy.
Definitely. And on that point, what are some of the hard decisions you've made about what not to build?
You always have the crazy thoughts as an entrepreneur, and you're wondering, could we do X? Could we do if we just do everything? What would that look like? No, I think it's not that crazy when you break it down. I think there's a lot of talk about at what point are we going to have AI doctors autonomously. That's not regulatory possible today. I don't think any patient would want that. I don't think any psychiatrist would want that. But it's definitely something that, if you say it for the first time, it sounds crazy. And then if you mull it over again, well, perhaps it's not that crazy. I think that's, fortunately, something that we decided against. That's not a very regulatory path. It's a very dangerous path. It's not necessarily something that's a demand for in the market either. So, we would rather focus on, well, the doctors that we have, the psychiatrists that we have, how can we bring them to as many people as possible? When we first started Aisel, I think my light bulb moment was it would be great if, you could use effective computing to track the emotional patterns of patients over time. I really thought, damn, so smart. Why haven't no one thought of this? Well, they have. We send out surveys to mental health professionals all over Europe to get insights into what would work for them and how they would like to see the world. No one wanted to get that emotional tracker. So I think there has been lots of ideas. A lot has been shut down the moment we spoke to a customer. And then, we progress with the ones where, okay, this is actually helping and it's achieving the goal, which for Aisel is to make sure that no one ever has to wait to get psychiatric help if they need it. Yeah,
and I guess it really underlines the importance of that close collaboration with your users, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about how you work, both with the partners that you have in the provider space in psychiatry and mental health, but also how are the patients involved?
So I think to start with the patients, as a company, we're keeping an arm's length to patients. We are not your care provider. We are not there to make decisions on your behalf. We are not a chatbot that you can ask about your problems. Our communication is a one-way street. We're a tool for doctors that can collect information from a patient, not the other way around. And I think that differentiation is very important to make, because we are there to enable psychiatrists, and I'm using psychiatrists and doctors interchangeably because they are doctors. We're there to enable psychiatrists to have more time for more patients. That's it. So the patients we're keeping arm's length to. what we can see in our data is that patients like what we do. They spend on average 55 minutes on a conversation. That, just to have some comparison mark, when I do it, because I obviously test our product a lot, it takes me 10, 15 to go through the questions that we have. But we see average times nearing an hour, because we are interpreting as that we have created a safe space and a logic flow where you're comfortable opening up. So that's the involvement that we have with patients. With the collaborators, I got to give all the credits to my co-founder, Christian. He is amazing. So he's leading our product, and product for us that, of course, encompass technology, but also encompass the product and the user journey and how would it work. So he sits in 5 calls a week. That's purely feedback. Every time we're considering a new release or a new feature or any way of like just changing a button, we ask our customers first, and our customers are psychiatrists. And so we do that ongoingly and always. And we have quite a few of the people that are using Aisel day to day that also want to contribute more. So we often see that when we onboard a new psychiatric clinic, well, they have their own way that they want things. And then, we co-create and co-develop that with them. It's not necessarily scalable in the long run to do it like that, and we'll find a way to make it scalable. Every input and every conversation that we have with a customer will, at the end of the day, and I hate calling them customers because I don't,
Sure.
Yeah. Anytime we have a conversation with a psychiatrist, they help us refine and retouch, and we do that both from new inputs, but also from recurringly speaking to the same people over again that know, okay, Aisel is this, what has been the development? And I think a lot of people think that's quite fun.
I want to ask a question. There's something I'm just very curious about that we kind of touched on a second ago. So, we were talking about this problem that there aren't enough psychiatrists to meet all of the patients who need them. And then you mentioned how in the early days you thought about, could an AI be that? Could an AI at least be that for some patients? So related to that, I'm curious to know what you and people at Aisel think about this epidemic of people talking to ChatGPT.
So I think these days we think the same thing as OpenAI, because they just revised all of their policies. So OpenAI, they've just introduced a new mental health staff. I think I read it was at least a sizable amount of mental health professionals that will sit and screen and monitor patient responses. That's a good first step. And they also limited the new model like GPT-5 that's not allowed to go in and give licensed advice, whether that be in healthcare or whether that be in legal. It can't do that anymore. Let's see if it does. I don't think it's hard to prompt around it. But I think they're doing the right things, because we can't have patients in vulnerable positions be reliant on a non-responsive system. We've already seen the first disasters of people killing themselves because of emotional reliance on health paths. We've seen that if you ask ChatGPT, hi, I've had a horrible day, everything's going wrong, and I lost my job, where's the nearest bridge? It will tell you, at least in the old models. And we can't have that. So I think it's very important for patients and users that they know there is not a human on the other side of ChatGPT. Maybe they will start implementing safety features if they haven't already, that you should call a provider. But it's so important that we make it clear to patients all around in any given context when you're speaking to a chatbot, when there's no one behind on the other side, there is no one to help you if it goes wrong. We've also seen examples where ChatGPT and OpenAI, it will agree with the patient to an extent that, especially if you're psychotic or if you are in a manic episode where some of the fundamental things that are happening is often that you think people are out to get you, you're connecting dots that, were you not in that state, you wouldn't connect them. And you can also you can experience hallucinations. And if you then go in and you tell ChatGPT, they're coming to get me and like everything thinks I'm so important. And if that just mirrors that and it reinforces that your belief is the right belief, that's not going to fly. With the new update, I think they are starting to fix some of these things. They're starting to fix the emotional reliance. They're taking it incredibly serious, which is fine. It's a minimum requirement that they should. Let's see where it ends. But any OpenAI tool, any tool that has to do with patient, need to make disclaimers that there's not a licensed mental health professional. If there's not, it needs to make disclaimers about this not being treatment, etc. And hopefully we'll soon get some clarity in messaging and regulation that healthcare companies can use when making that.
You said earlier, if people with mental health challenges are not able to get treatment, if they do have to sit in a 2-year waiting time, then of course they'll turn to whatever opportunities they have. And to your point, in complex cases, something is not necessarily better than nothing.
What we're seeing with ChatGPT, back to the point of it's now probably the world's biggest mental wellness provider. I call it wellness because the moment there's not a clinical decision and a doctor, it's not medical care. It shows that ChatGPT has 800 million people that uses it every week. And in every given week, 0.15%, they show signs of indicative, potentially heightened levels of emotional attachment to ChatGPT. That's the one where it could know. If it doesn't respond to you in the way you want, well, then you're going to be emotionally affected in the same way as if a person would do it. And 0.15% of users express suicidal intent. And, if you add it up to 0.15%, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you have 800 million users and then that amount has suicidal intent and there's no one to stop it, we're going to end up with a lot of people that, because of AI tools, maybe thought they had a helping hand and they didn't. And then, where does the responsibility then fall?
Yeah. So what's that telling us? Those numbers are showing us how big the demand for this care is. But to your point, if I understand it correctly, it's also showing that the current solution, being these general purpose models, is exacerbating it, is like adding to the problem.
It's hard to evaluate what they're adding to the problem, because what's the alternative? Like it says here, just so we get it a little less percentage-wise, it's 1.2 million people a week that has conversations about harming themselves on ChatGPT.
But does it also prove the fundamental thesis that technology can be a hand here in actually bringing these cases to light?
I think so, because what is uncovered is, there is such a big dark number in who needs mental health help. Of course, we can look at the waiting list, we can look at patients, that's fine, but that's only the people in the system. In a lot of cultures, mental health is still stigmatized. Sometimes you're not insured, you can't afford mental health, you're not allowed financially to even consider whether you have a mental health issues, because a lot of the sector is private. So I think what ChatGPT and OpenAI is showing is that the problem is, it's so big and it's way bigger than what probably any of us thought it is. Even with the crazy stats that says 1 in 5, then it's like actively every week, more than 1 million people on ChatGPT that's asking on how to hurt themselves. And it places such an importance on both OpenAI's ability to monitor these conversations, to escalate situations, right? But also that we have new foundational models that are built for healthcare specific elements. So for example, when you're looking at medical information, you need to assess what is factual, what is not. And I think that comes only if you're training this on actual data for the purpose, which is health. So the foundational models behind it, they have such a massive responsibility to make sure that we're getting that we're training on the right data, so that we're getting non-biased results, and that also that the use and the intent is the same. So, if it's not intended to be used as a help for mental health issues, well, you shouldn't use it as such.
I really want to talk about Aisel, and I want to talk about your experience, specifically your experience of trying to build it. When you looked to build the company, maybe even before it was named, when Aisel still belonged to Winnie the Pooh or Eeyore, what was it like what was the context when you started this? What was the solutions landscape like when you started to look into it?
So I think to answer the first part of your question, like where was I at when I jumped into this space? I have a business background, studied in INSEAD and did my education there, started my career in management consulting, and then I got sick. And I was in the psychiatric system getting help. Luckily, I managed to access it, but the whole process was an 8-month process. So when I got better, I needed for myself, both on a personal level, but also on a professional level, to spend my time with something where I can see an impact in the world. So I started out by joining a venture firm that was investing in mental health solutions. And then, as I grew more confident in the space and I saw, okay, there is a lot of solutions out there addressing different aspects of mental health, but fundamentally something needs to change. And we need to not just add a scribe tool that can give back 10% more documentation time or 30%. We need to fundamentally change the way that psychiatric capacity is spent. So I think that's where I was coming from. There's a fundamental shift that needs to happen. I hope Aisel can be, and I believe Aisel can be, the ones to help enable that. The solution space, on the other hand, and it's very funny because if you're coming as an investor and working in the space from that perspective, you have a very large overview of companies. So you can very easily see, okay, what's happening these days. So back in 2023, what we saw a lot of was employee betterment. We saw a lot of solutions that wanted to go in and sell B2B to C, or at least, your bank or your employer will give you some sort of wellness offering. Then later we started seeing a lot of wellness therabots, wellness bots. And again, I call them wellness because if it's not medically graded, it's wellness. If you're not allowed to perform an action, or if you're not interacting in a system where there is someone allowed to take an action about clinical decision making, in my book, it's wellness.
Sure.
That includes ChatGPT. And I think once ChatGPT allowed users to build wrappers around them, we saw a lot of companies that were trying to make these like mental health bots. You can chat to them every day. And that sort of faded down now. Then we saw a massive influx of Scribe, which was definitely enabled by the fact that the big ambient Scribe players, they're killing it. Tandem out of Sweden just raised a 50 million round. Napla in the US, but also with French headquarters, raised the Series C recently. That was also massive. And, of course, we're seeing a lot of companies also adding to that. That was in the next wave. And now the wave we're seeing now, there was a little co-pilot wave. I think Aisel accidentally fell into that because we thought, oh, maybe that's how we position ourselves. We are trying to get ourselves up again because, no, we need to move beyond that. So we've definitely seen some waves, both in business models, who you're targeting, how you target them. And the big driver for a lot of these things have been technology. What does technology allow us to do?
We've gone through these stages, as you mentioned, August. We need to save 5% of somebody's time, or we need to save 10 minutes at some point throughout the day. And it has felt really powerful. And there's been a health economics argument to it. And it's been easy to get budget holders to be able to invest in that. And thank God it feels like we've matured out of that space nowadays. The idea that you would make a small adjustment to an existing workflow, save a little bit of time, and that all of the implications would be positive and everybody would love it.
I think it was operating on the assumption that 10 minutes saved will automatically convert to 10 minutes more of patient time. Yeah. We haven't seen that being the case in any case. It's not a one-to-one time saved more capacity for the specific thing that you designed that you wanted more capacity for. You can't guarantee that an hour saved is an hour for a patient.
Especially overworked people in the first place. They maybe make a coffee.
Yeah, psychiatrists are working at 2 to 5 times above safe capacity already. Yeah. It needs to be a fundamental change.
I find the idea of building a company in this space daunting. I've been a little bit exposed to it, obviously, in my time at Corsi and meeting clever people like you, but how hard has it been?
Had I known what I would get into, I would have picked a different space. Luckily, I'm in love with the problem in the sense that Aisel has the potential to go in and make sure more people can access psychiatric care. That's at least what we envision. And now we already earlier today talked about how many people are affected by mental health issues. So if we just go with the estimate that 1 in 5 will be affected, that's not just 1 in 5 people, because maybe every 5th person will have a mental health issue, but mental health affects the entire family. So you have the entire population, almost, if we're assuming that it's a family of 5, that will have an exposure to mental health struggles. Our society is, I'm not going to say it's collapsing because of mental health issues, but I'm very close to saying that. We need to make sure that we're giving everyone a nice time on earth, and that we help, and that we make sure that we have the tools to help people when they need it most. We've seen this massive influx of patients both after COVID, but I think also Gen Z has struggled potentially more than previous generations because of less stigma. We've grew up on the internet. We've been overexposed to horrible information. And as an individual, you now need to have an opinion about the war in Ukraine, the new mayor in New York, etc. You are so exposed, and that also comes with a toll to your mental health.